So Christy Arkovich here, Tampa, Florida, your student loan attorney. We are starting a new video series with Melissa Solevilla at Carey Leisure Neal. They are mostly a personal injury firm in Clearwater, Florida. And when I talked with her a few minutes the other day, I thought that there's a lot of things that we can help our younger clients or the parents and grandparents when you're talking with someone younger about just the facts of life from a legal aspect. And it may involve some student loan tips, how to avoid them and some different things to do. It may involve some tips on how to react if you're in an auto accident, what kind of insurance to get and things like that. Where I'm coming from is my nephews have recently graduated. And when I say graduation, it's not just high school, but they went on to college. And then one is kind of like a computer sciences guy, and the other one is a new lawyer. And so when we saw the period of time from graduation from high school through college, they ended up just not knowing a lot of things that many of us have run across our day-to-day lives. And are you seeing the same thing? You have a young son, right?
Absolutely. I have two young adult sons, and I have tried hard to teach them the importance of having proper auto insurance and having all those things that they need in line. But so if it weren't for moms and aunts like us, who teaches them that lesson?
Exactly. And we do some bankruptcy too. And so we run across what happens when things go wrong. And my student loan practice is usually all about what happens when something went wrong. And it can really be harmful for, 10, 20, or even 30 years. I mean, and so with student loans, for instance, I've got people with student loans that are in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s. And had they planned a little bit better, they wouldn't have been in that situation. And with insurance, one of the obvious tips that I always have started out talking with, and let's kind of like go back and forth with some of our favorite tips. One of the favorite tips that I have is don't ask your insurance agent for the lowest possible price. Exactly, because you don't want to waive coverage. Melissa, do you know what the current statistics are with how many uninsured drivers there are out there, or just an approximate number?
Absolutely. According to the Insurance Information Institute, the last time they reviewed the statistics in Florida, we are the sixth highest state for uninsured drivers.
Wow.
So 1 out of every 5 drivers in the state of Florida don't have any insurance coverage at all. So what those young people don't understand is if they don't have that uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage, on their policy, if they're involved in an accident and they're hit by one of the 20% of drivers out there on the road, there may be no insurance coverage to help them or protect them.
And many of those young drivers won't have their own insurance either through like an employer or something. A lot of folks at that age group don't work for companies that have full benefits. And
Absolutely.
So they could end up with a lot of healthcare coverage as well as damage to their car and so forth. So I'd like everyone to know I didn't prep Melissa for that question. She had no idea that was coming. So Melissa, I commend you on your being up to date and knowing what's going on out there and how many drivers. 1 out of every 5 drivers is uninsured. And
we're passionate about educating people about those statistics. I personally was involved in an accident when I was pregnant with my first son. I was 12 weeks pregnant. I was hit by a 19-year-old girl who was text messaging at 75 miles per hour on the interstate. She plowed into my husband and I ended up with over $60,000 in medical bills. And if I had not had, she had no insurance coverage. So I had $60,000 in medical bills, permanent injuries,
wow.
And she had no auto insurance.
Sure.
So she was one of the 20%. So if it had not been for the coverage that I carried on my policy, I would have just had $60,000 in medical bills, an injured neck and back, a new baby, and a ton of medical bills that I was responsible for.
And how much did that cost you approximately, that coverage that you got? What did it run?
For me, I think it was an extra $20 a month.
Exactly. It's a tiny, tiny amount for what could be a catastrophic type loss.
It's a trip to Chick-fil-A,
Yeah, exactly. So the point there is don't waive or underinsured motorist coverage. There's a little box on your insurance policy. Don't waive it. Don't check it. And then, later in life, those umbrella policies are really good. My husband and I have those on our vehicles. We think that that is probably our biggest area of exposure. So if you're in a profession that you think you're going to have assets later, if you might inherit assets, if you're doing well, whatever you're doing, make sure that you maybe think about an umbrella coverage because it's an extra $200 a year or so. Is that about right?
I think I pay $500 a year and I'm heavily insured, but that's several years out of college.
Exactly.
And
So
I
that's a
afford
little
it
bit
now.
later. Yeah, that's a little bit later. But for my nephews who are fairly, they have what would be good paying professions, I've kind of started to put that bug in their ear of, later in life, you might want to think about getting this because if you go to a hospital with a broken leg, it's $100,000 right there. And many of these policies, if they're collision only, they don't have bodily injury. And if they have bodily injury, it's 100/300, which for those uninformed, 100 means 100 per person, 300 per accident. And so that's a broken leg. Well, what happens if you have a lot more that happens, which, unfortunately, that's probably possible, a good possibility. And so that umbrella will expand that to potentially $1 million or whatever your number is. And it doesn't cost very much. You said 500, I said 200. I don't pay our household bills, so it could be 500. I really don't know. But I remember it was ridiculously low when we got it. And I was so happy to have the peace of mind that came with.
Well, and my umbrella policy covers 2 young adult males.
Oh,
so mine probably is 500 while yours is 200.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
So, they increase the insurance premiums quite a bit. I love another point that you brought up is don't go to your adjuster or don't call Geico or don't go online and talk to Flo and just ask for the cheapest insurance coverage. What a lot of young professionals don't understand is that the cheapest insurance coverage they'll sell you in the state of Florida doesn't have bodily injury coverage on it. And what bodily injury coverage is that's the coverage that fixes someone else's body if you break their body. Mm-hmm. If you hurt them and you're involved in an accident, bodily injury coverage is the coverage that you have to compensate them, okay? Because accidents do happen. And so you need, bodily injury coverage to help someone else. In Florida, they will sell you an insurance policy without bodily injury coverage on your policy. If you purchase that coverage and then you get into an accident and you hurt the other driver and you don't have that bodily injury coverage, even though they allowed you to purchase it, then your driver's license can be suspended. Mm-hmm. You can get a judgment against you that's going to carry you through those paychecks with that fabulous new career that you're building. It's very important.
I just noticed you put up a blog about that recently. And your blog is found at careyandleisure.com. And you talked about all the different things that could happen if you were at fault. It's just a good thing to be aware of that. Most of the time when we run into folks, they didn't realize that those things could happen. Driver's license suspensions, for instance, that's something that we try to correct in a bankruptcy. Many times we're able to do that, but they don't really realize that's going to happen. One thing I wanted to point back to real quick is we have cameras, those little tiny cameras on our windshield. When you got in your accident, they probably didn't make them yet, just guessing. Yeah. Ours now doesn't do the rear. It was one of the first generations, but now they do the rear too. And do you have those on your cars now?
I do. The car that I purchased, actually, I have a Mall-mobile. And so the vehicle that I have actually has them built into the car.
Oh,
I have them on the side cameras. I have a 360-degree camera, which is wonderful for me from a liability aspect, because if someone alleges that I caused an accident, I have the video footage. I make sure the SD card is always in there so that it's preserving the videos. And I have videos to prove whether I caused the accident or not. But I always also make sure that I have adequate coverage. So if I do cause an accident, because I make mistakes, I am protecting my family's assets and I'm protecting my family's financial security by having proper insurance coverage.
Makes sense. My husband, I mentioned to you, was a DUI law enforcement officer for like 25 years or so. And so he ran into that problem all the time. He would constantly go to a scene. There'd be 2 drivers. Each one of them is alleging the other one's at fault. And then one of them would kind of call him to the side and said, I have a camera. And Robbie would look at the film, or not film, he'd look at the card, whatever it is. And the other guy gets the ticket or gets arrested or whatever it is. And it was an instant fix, and it happened a lot, he said. So we have them on our vehicles. We strongly recommend those little cameras. I guess we don't have vehicles that have them built in like you do, but it was really easy to attach. It's never fallen down. We use a Garmin brand. There's like a million of them out there. And now they do backup, and he's been rear-ended. So I think backup is equally as important as having a camera in the front, because you'd be amazed at the stories that are out there.
We've had a lot of cases where, because it's one of the questions we ask when somebody calls us is, do you have video cameras on your car,
Yeah.
dash cam videos? And we've had several cases where people did have the video cameras and someone contested liability. The other driver would refuse to take responsibility. And I had one case where the whole accident was caught on camera. And then the other driver who did come over into our client's lane and hit him, then caused him to spin. The dash cam video stayed on the entire time that this guy was flipping over and over.
Oh, wow.
Reaction. It was really a traumatic experience, but it was very helpful for us from a legal perspective to have that evidence preserved. I mean, you can't replace that.
Sure. Well, thank you for your time this morning. I think that this series, we'd like to do a series of consumer tips, how to help our youngsters, whether it's general contract type things, injury automobile type things, insurance, and then student loans. So I thank you for your time this morning, and hope you have a great day. Hope everyone had a chance to tune in. Thank you.